All right, so video number 2, motion sequence. Here in our timeline window, we have across the top, we have, I think I've set this to seconds. I should have, yes. So this shows us how many seconds. So if you want to zoom out, you can use the mouse wheel to zoom in and out, which will show you more time or less time. If I zoom in, this bar can be dragged open and closed to show more or less time, and then it can also be dragged around to show you particular chunks of time. So, this shows me just up to the first 3 seconds or so, and it kind of self-lengthens as you add content to it. First, we need to create some tracks to put stuff in here. So I'm going to create a track. The first thing I want to animate is my avatar. So I'm going to take demo dude, and I already did the stuff where I set the demo dude here when I imported it. Oh, that's weird. It didn't update. I better update him. So demo dude, I need to set his rig to humanoid so that we'll take the humanoid data. All right, take demo dude. I'm going to drop him in, and it's going to ask me what kind of a track I want to make. And I want to make an animation track. And we will talk, we probably won't bother with all of them, but we'll talk about the activation and the audio track. So when I move this playhead here by clicking and dragging, or I can click the play button, nothing happens because there's no animation information here. To add motion capture, I'm going to go over down here to the motion capture data, and here with the ARRI test, you probably want to click and drag this on here, but that is not the actual data. It's just kind of a container. Open it up, the one with the triangle with the 3 lines on it. Click and drag, and we get a clip in place. All right. So now this clip can be dragged either way, left or right. And so this goes from 0 to about 30, almost 35 seconds in time. And you can see how the timeline kind of expanded. But you can zoom in and out, again, to look at more or less of the timeline. So probably the first thing, now we're facing the wrong direction. So you know what I'm going to do real quick? I'm actually going to move my camera to the other side. And when you get this project, your camera will almost certainly just be on the right side. So I'm going to go to a top view, go to my move tool. This will give you a little bit of a lesson on how things work. And then as I move it, it still wants to look at that look at object. So I'm just going to move it back to here. And that should be just fine. Okay, so now I can see him. I'll move in maybe a little bit more closely down here to see what I'm looking at. All right, so now if I click and drag on this, we start to get the motion plays back on the character. Looks pretty good. When you put this motion in, you're going to want to start to manipulate it because we're not looking for just straight playback on it. So in terms of basic editing of the clip, the first thing we want to do is we want to maybe get rid of this T-pose at the beginning. And actually, I didn't give a note that I should have, which is when we record, we basically want to come all the way out of the T-pose before we start motion. And I didn't give that note to ARRI. So she starts to move right out of the T-pose. So maybe we want to start right here. Select the clip, right click, go to editing and choose, you could say split, we'll cut it, but I want to get rid of the whole start. So I'm going to say trim start. And that's deleted that whole start. So now for the first few seconds, literally there's no motion, and then it picks up at around 4 seconds. If you want that to be the very start at 0, we can bring that and line it up at the very beginning. And now we can either drag this, we can hit play here, or we can also use our space bar. Your mouse will need to be in this window. If I'm over here and I hit space bar, or up here, nothing happens. So your mouse has to be in this window so it knows. So it's called context sensitive. So it knows. All right, so we've got our clip in place. Very cool. I'm going to take my virtual camera. I'm just going to move it in a little bit more closely. This red area is a little bit of a video overlay, so it doesn't mean anything is wrong. All right. You can then take this clip and you can cut it up further if you want to put different sequences together. So let's say that we wanted to run this sequence here to this point, and then we wanted it maybe to repeat one more time. So I'm going to take this clip, right click, and here I'm going to go to editing and choose split. Makes it into 2 pieces, and I'll just take this end piece and I'm going to drag it out. I'm going to take the first part of it, and what I want to do is make a copy of this. So select it, and you can right click and choose copy, and then I'm going to right click and choose paste, and it's going to paste it basically wherever my mouse is. I'm going to use my time bar to zoom in a little bit, because then you'll want to be in closer sometimes. And I'm going to click and drag this, and I think by default over here in this menu there are some I thought there were some snapping controls. Where are the snapping controls? There's a way you can turn on snapping, and I thought it was over here. Anyways, you can get it so that it will pop right to the beginning of that. But what we're going to do is overlap this a little bit. All right. So here the dancer kind of slides back and forth. We'll fix that in a little bit. All right. We could also take this clip and we could change its speed. So let's say that we wanted it to repeat, but we wanted it to move at half the speed. We could select this and come over here to the inspector. And again, it's the little chunk of clip in the timeline that you want to click on and set the speed to 0.5. Hit enter. And you'll notice that the clip gets longer because it's moving at half speed. It takes longer for it to complete its to get through all the data. So now when I move my playhead here and I hit space, we transition, we keep going in the same thing. You can keep adjusting this, right? You don't like 0.5, you're like, I don't want it to be that slow. How about 0.7? Gets a little shorter because now it's playing back a little bit faster. One of the things that is really interesting, and I'll find something here that's a little bit more extreme, is that I mentioned that the data for where you are in the space, where the performer is in the space, is tied to the hip. So if we try to join together or crossfade between two locations that are a long way away, so let's say here, I'm going to go ahead and trim the start, so this will be the beginning, and let's say I go to, I don't know, here. You can see these two spots are kind of a long way away. All right, so let me split this. All right, and I'm actually going to go back, so I just have maybe a little bit. It hasn't moved a lot. And I'll split this, and then I'm going to get rid of this chunk. So let's say I had a situation where I wanted to try to sort of blend or crossfade between this clip here and this one. I'm going to put it right next to each other, and you'll notice that there's a pretty big jump between those two. But what if I wanted this motion here to be a continuation of this motion, including not only the location, but also the orientation of how the hips are facing? So the hips are the boss. And one thing I wanted to show you real quick is if I take the demo dude here in the scene and I select it, and I grab the move tool, and I drag it over here, and I come back to my timeline and I do it, it snaps back, right? That data is forcing it to be in a particular location. There are ways around that, but we're not too worried about that. So I'm going to zoom in here on this transition. And then what I'm going to do is, number one, make sure that these, because right now it's butted right up against it, so it's a hard cut. I'm going to drag this over a little bit. And generally you want to keep these transitions pretty darn short. You don't want them to take too long. So this one is pretty quick. Then what I want to do is I want to tell this following clip, the new clip that's coming in, to orient itself to where the hips were before. So I'm going to right click on that. And I'm going to choose Match Offsets to Previous Clip. So what that does is it takes the hips position and rotation information, and it adds or subtracts some information to it depending on where the hips are in the clip before it. Boom. Doesn't look like anything happened. But here, what you can see is, as we do this, we get the transition. Now, it's pretty quick, and actually, what's really making it look jerky is the arms. And we might need to, we could try lengthening this a little bit. Maybe it's a little bit too short. And after I do this, I usually will rerun the match. That's a little bit better. You do have to watch out how much change there is from the beginning of one clip to the end of the other. You'll notice that this one, and I'll go back, let's do this one. So this one, I picked these partially because the poses are pretty close. So I'm going to zoom in on this first one because we didn't actually blend them. They're overlapping a little bit. Right click, match offset to previous clip. Now this one you can see is almost perfect, right? So you'll want to look at the positions of the hands and the arms. There's a little bit of quickness there. And also I try to make sure that, like, if the left foot is down in one clip, the left foot is down in the other. Here we actually go into a two-footed stance, although it kind of sweeps through. So having the same foot planted is good. If you go from one foot to the other, it can look pretty weird. So you can blend from one thing to it. You can blend from anything to anything. But the quality of that blend will depend a lot on what kind of pose they're in, what kind of position they're in. And there are times when we did recode where we kind of made the transition look more apparent. Like we wanted it to look like a transition in a couple of the spots. Okay, so this is probably the vast bulk of the different editing that you'll do is taking clips, cutting them up, maybe sometimes stretching them out or shortening them. You can stretch out or shorten any clip by grabbing the end of it. Right? So let's say we wanted to change this. Let's say we pulled this out. Okay, at the end of this clip, the left foot is down, the right foot is up. And then maybe we wanted to go, we wanted to start a little earlier. We could take this clip and drag the beginning of it out a little bit more. Right? Or we could cut it back a little bit more. It's essentially the same as trimming. And then we could come back, right click, put it in place, right click, match offset to previous clip. Right? A little quick step there, but not too bad. You could lengthen it out. So all this stuff is super adjustable that's in there. All right? And then you can click, if you want to click, select more than one click at a time. Let's say we wanted to bring these two over and join them up. I can click one and then shift select on another. And it will bring it over. Take a look at that transition. Pretty quick, and so I probably would have to overlap that and perhaps take this one. I think I can do 2 and do match offset to previous clip, right? Sometimes, because a dancer is up or down, you'll end up with the dancer kind of going up in the air a little bit. So let's go back and figure out what we got going on here. So here a dancer's on the ground, I think because the hips are down. So what I'm going to do here actually is I am going to manually offset this clip. I'm going to do the equivalent of match offset to previous clip, but I'm going to do it specifically. So let's run this one more time. Yeah, see, it's a little floaty. So I'm going to grab this clip. And over here in the properties, the inspector, where we set the speed, we have clip transform offsets. These essentially perform the same jobs as that automatic does, except we get all the control. So I'm going to click the move version of it. This looks like the normal move tool. I kind of wish they made it look a little bit different. And I'm just going to select this. I've got this clip selected, and I'm going to shift it down a little bit. So now we've got better foot placement on the ground. And then I'm going to align these others, right? So I'll select these two and again do match offsets, and that helps bring it down a little bit, but not enough. So we've got a little bit of a hip offset issue, no big deal. This is even something you could do, you know, later in the process. So we'll bring this one down, and then let's go ahead and realign this one. Much better. Okay, so sometimes they just, sometimes they get off the ground, and even here we're still floating a little bit. So it feels like it's adding a little bit to every hip. And you could do this as a final cleanup. Okay, awesome. That's a good spot. I think I'm going to stop this video, and then I'll dive into the next level of editing on the next one.